Hi students. So I didn't plan to make a video today, but as I was reading your stories, I was noticing some common things coming up. And so I thought it'd be easier for me to explain it in a video to all of you. So let's talk about revising a little bit. And so in our stories that we've written, I've noticed that a lot of us are sort of doing a lot of telling, which is totally fine. And it's sometimes a great place to start. Sometimes it's where we need to start as we start thinking, because writing about ourselves can be really uncomfortable. And sometimes that's where we start, which is totally fine. So as we revise, though, I want us to think about a few things. Obviously, when we're telling our stories, right, we're not just telling the story, right? We're really trying to get the reader to understand something about who we are, which is why we were thinking about those essence objects and those values. So we want to keep our essence objects and values in mind. And I want us to think about if there's a place where we can maybe use those essence objects as a sort of symbol in our stories, or where we can show what our values are through the way that we are describing in a situation. And so I want us to keep that in mind. So that's number one. And then the second thing I think we need to do is that I feel like we need to think about those text structures that we talked about, right? So we talked about two different kinds of text structures, right? We talked about the hero's journey and we talked about the montage. And they're both great structures for writing a personal narrative. And so let's say we're talking about, so a lot of you wrote about leadership, right? So leadership is something that a lot of you have had the opportunity to show at our school. And so let's say you're writing about being, okay, a lot of you wrote about the mural project. So let's say that, you know, you were a leader during this mural project and you really helped your group come up with their ideas. So you have two options for how you tell that story, right? And it depends on what your experience was. So you could write about that hero's journey, right? Let's say that this was something that was hard for you, that you didn't think you'd be able to do. Maybe you don't think of yourself as a creative person, or maybe you hate working in groups, or maybe you didn't know anyone that you were working with, and that made it really uncomfortable and awkward for you because you were like 15, right? So if you want to do a hero's journey, what I would recommend is just brainstorming really specifically, what was the timeline? Like what happened in the course of that project? So you can create like a little timeline maybe. You can do it horizontally. You can also do it vertically if you want, where you're thinking about what happened first, what happened second, what happened third, what happened last. And then once you have, and try to get as detailed as possible, like really try to get down into the weeds, what exactly happened, because the more you have, the more you can use, and you're not going to use everything. So once you have everything there, you're going to choose maybe, oh, this is a good moment. I can really describe that moment well. I can describe this moment. I can describe this moment, and this moment. And then you're going to rearrange, you're going to organize those moments. You're going to write those moments so that it's like this staircase up to success, right? So you have this nice hero's journey structure. So that's one way you could do it. But maybe it wasn't a hero's journey for you, right? Maybe it was more like a montage, and maybe that feels more correct for the experience that you had. So it could be a montage. And so if you're doing a montage, I think a classic bubble map is a great way to show this, to brainstorm for this. And maybe you've got this and you're thinking of a mural project, but you could also think about maybe other art projects you've had or other group projects you've had that might have led up to that. Like what are some other, you can think a little bit more widely here. And so then you're going to think of all the moments that connect with that, right? And this is just free association. There's no correct answer here, right? Write whatever comes to mind. If you think about this project, think about art projects or group projects in general, and you're just writing it all out. And so then what you might come up with is you might be like, oh, this moment actually, this is the story. This story really shows my values in a way that I think is super important and will be great. That could happen. That's great. That's amazing if that happens. Or you could be like, you know what? This story, and this story, I feel like three pieces really go together. I feel like if I tell these three pieces, it's really going to show this value about myself that I want to share. It's going to show that I'm creative, or it's going to show that I'm caring, or it's going to show that I'm hardworking, whatever it is that you want to share about yourself. And so then you're going to tell a story that sort of combines those three. So that's my recommendation for making these a little bit more showy and a little bit less telly, is to keep your essence, objects, and values in mind, because they might be a really useful way to show rather than tell. And then also to really think, do some brainstorming. So I would say, I'm going to write a little list here. Let me make some space for us to see it. I think brainstorm, and that could be a timeline or a bubble map, and then narrow in on the stories that show your values, right? So narrow in on those stories that really highlight your values, what's important to you, and then describe them, write them with, think about, so if we think about surrendering, right? And the amount of detail he put into describing the things that fell out of his desk when the teacher turned it over, or in learning to read, the way Malcolm X described those first pages of the dictionary and like describes the aardvark section, or even in Magical Dinners, the way he describes all the various surfaces that he licks through the course of that story, right? Like, or even in Lahiri's story, she talks so specifically about all of the foods that her family eats, and all of the spices that they bring home with them. So there's a lot of detail. So she doesn't write about everything, right? She doesn't write about every single family dinner she's ever had, but she does choose really specific details. So try to think about that. Anyways, so I hope that this helps. It's just something to try. If you need any help, or you want me to look at any of your brainstorms, please let me know, and good luck.